Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here on MMA Junkie, we take you on a quick spin through the week's news. I'm Simon Head from here in the UK, and on this week's show, I'm joined by MMA Junkie's Mike Bond, and he's joined by MMA Junkie Radio's Gorgeous George and Goes. We got loads to pack in this week, so let's get things started. And where else can we begin but with the main event on Saturday night, as Jorge Masvidal stepped up on 6 days' notice to take on Kamaru Usman at UFC 251. But on the night, Gamebred couldn't quite find a path to victory as Usman ran out the convincing winner on the scorecards. Masvidal's stock was soaring ahead of fight night, but where does he stand now following that loss to Usman? And can he work his way back to get himself another title shot? Guys, give us your take on Gamebred's game plan from here. We got 3 minutes on the clock. Mike, kick us off.
I think he's still got options. I mean, I said going in, as long as Jorge Masvidal didn't lose this fight like a quick finish, or I know it was a pretty convincing decision, but not like a 50-43 type of blowout on the scorecards. He had moments in this fight, and I think enough moments that you can go forward and say, hey, if we were going to do a rematch in the future, you could sell it as having the full camp, the adjustments he could make, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there is hope to be found for Jorge Masvidal coming out of this. He's obviously still a big star. Had he won this fight, yes, it would have opened up a lot more options for him. He kind of has to reel it back a little bit in terms of the fights he's going to have going forward. He's not that, A++ superstar he would have been if he had won the title here. But I think for him, he's still in a pretty good spot. He gets one win over a Colby Covington, a Leon Edwards, someone like that. He's right back in there. Nate Diaz, if they want to do that rematch. So Jorge Masvidal, even in a loss here, has a lot of good options. I think he has some narratives he can sell in terms of a rematch. So I don't think it's too bad being Jorge Masvidal coming out of this loss.
Yeah, he's got himself a new contract, and he's probably still got plenty of options. Goes, what's the best one for him moving forward?
Well, I think there's just about any way to spin things in the UFC, and allow me to do that. I would imagine they're going to say something like, yes, Jorge suffered a loss on Saturday night, but it was short notice. And guess what? He had to go all the way across the world. He's the BMF. That's what a BMF does. So as far as this thing from this loss, I think it kind of goes away. Now it's just something internal that Jorge's got to deal with. He's got to shore up that wrestling. Kamaru Usman helped him out a lot in the post-fight interviews, praising Jorge Masvidal and his efforts. So that's going to help Jorge a lot. And like Mike mentioned, he's got so many different options. The tricky thing is, and here's one thing kind of outside looking in, I know that the tough coaches are pretty much set, but boy, if they do set him up with Colby, I would have loved to see those guys on The Ultimate Fighter. Getting that every week, can you imagine, guys?
That would be outstanding. George, he can sell main events. He doesn't have a championship belt. He's got a BMF belt. But what does he do next?
Simon, don't ever put me last again. I had to follow a contender for Journalist of the Year and Goes, a 13-year veteran in the game. They left me with nothing. They covered it all. They did brilliantly there. Listen, he does have those options that the guys talked about. All those fights are gangster fights. The best friends, now they're rivals, or no, they're not even teammates anymore with Covington. Running it back with BMF, I'm not warm to that. I would be warm if Nick Diaz stepped up for, bigger brother, or, replacing the little brother. But Nick Diaz is just nowhere to be found. And then, of course, there is Leon Edwards, who I believe, and I don't want to tease my future answer here on one of these questions, I think he's going to get left out. 3-piece in a soda. Maybe there's time to run it back. Except Edwards wants to do that now. Masvidal's talking about, hey, see me at the end of the year. So more than likely, it's going to be Covington later in the year if Covington wants to wait that long as well.
Yeah, and don't worry, George. The Sunglasses Wearer of the Year award is still very much up for grabs.
White Island, baby.
Tony Ferguson's already got the lead on that one, man.
That's a very good point. Very good point. Well, runners-up's not too bad. But speaking of runners-up, Kamaru Usman obviously defeated Jorge Masvidal at the main event on Saturday night to continue running through the best 170-pounders in the world. But who should be next? Gilbert Burns was supposed to be the man in the cage facing Usman at UFC 251 before that positive COVID test ruled him out of the running. And Leon Edwards is the contender with the longest win streak in the division, not holding a championship belt right now. So both men are laying claim to that next title shot. They've been sniping at each other on social media. But who deserves to get that shot first? Are you Team Burns or are you Team Edwards? Or have you got a left field alternative to throw into the mix? We'll do 3 more minutes on the clock, guys. Goes, you kick us off.
Leon Edwards has lost a lot in the process, guys, due to pretty much terrible luck. Gilbert Burns was the guy. He was slotted to get the shot, but the whole testing positive for COVID-19 didn't allow that. So the UFC going forward here, they have this knack for going with the hot hand. And I think right now, what's etched in everybody's brain is what Gilbert Burns did to Tyron Woodley, who's arguably one of the greatest welterweights of all time. I mean, that's a big victory for him. And the UFC tends to go with that hot hand. So, you know, there's little sublining plots here, like them being training partners, him and Usman, Gilbert Burns and Usman. They probably want to rectify that as soon as possible. So I would imagine I don't see how it couldn't be Burns. You got to remember Usman has a victory over Rocky. So I think that's what makes the most sense.
What do you reckon, George? It's a really tough call, this. I mean, Leon's been there for ages, but Burns has taken advantage. He's got the hot hand right now.
Yeah, you nailed it. So Edwards does have the longer win streak. And look, in that win streak, there's some really solid wins in there. But he was offered a shot at 249, and we checked in with Leon Edwards. The visa was still good to go. The pandemic was just starting to unfold. He decided not to go. He wasn't going to have his full team. But you know the UFC doesn't roll like that all the time. Look at Jared Gordon and the patchwork team he's putting together. No disrespect to Felder, of course, who's going to take off the headphones, and Eric Nixick, who's going to step in. That's a quality team. I'm just saying, not the team that you've been working with. Sometimes it works out that way. But listen, here's the important thing. Since Edwards' last fought, Gilbert Burns has fought 4 times, and 2 of them are big names, Damian Maia and the former champ Tyron Woodley. He's got Mo on his hand. That's momentum. And I just don't see the UFC backing off of that. Then you got Dana White, who practically just smashed any type of controversy there might be. It sucks for Edwards, but Edwards did have his chances. He just elected not to do it. So I think he's going to have to take another fight, and I think they're going to go with Burns.
Yeah, it looks like Burns is the guy in pole position, but who deserves it more, Mike?
That's a tough one. I mean, I would like to be the contrarian here and be like, hey, Leon Edwards is going to get it. But I think just all these signs are pointing to Gilbert Burns at this point. I think if you look at the resume, I think Gilbert Burns probably has the better resume too. I mean, they have the common opponent in Gunnar Nelson. And then you look at what their previous 2 wins against both former champions, Edwards beating RDA and Burns beating Tyron Woodley. Who's the more impressive win there? Obviously Woodley, coming off the title reign, he was number 1 ranked according to the UFC's rankings. He stopped Damian Maia in the fight before that, which is an extremely difficult thing to do. So I think Gilbert Burns definitely has the better wins at this moment, even though his winning streak is a touch shorter. It's not that much shorter, though. I mean, you look at Edwards, he's won 8 in a row. Yes, they're all at welterweight. Gilbert Burns has won 6 in a row, and they're spread across 2 divisions. But still, his resume is pretty damn nice. And I think just all signs point to Gilbert Burns getting the shot. Dana White basically saying as much. So that's the fight we got.
All right, large sections of MMA Twitter were screaming robbery as Alexander Volkanovski shaded a razor-thin split decision against Max Holloway to retain the UFC featherweight title at UFC 251. It means that Holloway's now faced the Aussie twice and lost on both occasions. He's still considered to be one of the greatest featherweight champions in UFC history, but the record books show that he's coming off back-to-back losses to the champ. So what's the smart play for Max Holloway from here? It's a tricky spot for him. Try and find a way out of it for him, guys. We've got 3 minutes on the clock. George, you can go first.
All right, I'm going to get crazy here. Look, Holloway, what he's done is he's fought a lot of guys 2 times, like Aldo, Volkanovski, Poirier. I want to give him a fresh matchup, but at the same time, Holloway's only going to want to fight those big names. I would say that if the Korean Zombie loses to Brian Ortega, I'm into Holloway versus the Korean Zombie. But if Ortega loses to Korean Zombie, and I don't believe that fight's official, but it looks probable. But if that happens, I don't really want to see Holloway versus Brian Ortega. So here we go, guys. I'm going to get crazy. Patricio Freire, Pitbull, he wants some of that action. Okay. Why doesn't Dana White do what he did back in 2005, I believe? He sent Chuck Liddell to Pride to get into that Grand Prix. Send Holloway. Tell Coker, let one of those guys drift off to the side. I'm sending Holloway. He's going to finish out that featherweight Grand Prix. Am I crazy here? I mean, you guys are feeling it or what?
It's crazy, but I'd love to see it. Mike, what do you reckon?
Yeah, you're crazy. I mean, that would be awesome. That sounds like fun on paper, but I just see zero incentive or reasoning for the UFC to do that at this point. Would be cool though. Bellator does shows in Hawaii. If they could get Max Holloway on one of those cards, that'd be pretty awesome for him. But if we're keeping it in the realm of reality here, I think Max Holloway just goes back to work, man. I mean, look at his post-fight statement. Pure class from him is handling this loss like he does every time extremely well. I think a lot of people feel he won that fight, myself included. And for him, I think he just kind of goes back to the drawing board. He is only 28 years old. There could be the option to move up to lightweight. I think we ultimately see him there one day. I just don't think it happens right now. If he does move up, I'd like to see him take 6 months or so to fully prepare his body, not taking it on 6 weeks notice like he did when he fought Dustin Poirier. But I think if you're Holloway, you're just kind of looking at the next contender who makes sense. It seems like we have some big featherweight fights coming up, including on Wednesday between Dan Ige and Kelvin Kattar. I think maybe that is a fight that could produce his next opponent. So there's options out there for Holloway. I mean, he's stuck in this title purgatory in terms of Alexander Volkanovski holding the belt. But I think, you look at some of the contenders on the rise. If you're Holloway, I don't think it's a terrible bet to just sit there and maybe see if Alexander Volkanovski loses to one of these guys like Ortega, Korean Zombie, Zabit, etc. Then Max Holloway probably gets that immediate first title shot at whoever the new champion may be.
Perfect. Goes. You got about 30 seconds. What do you reckon?
It's such an unfortunate situation for the guy. I think if you're the UFC, you probably don't want Max knocking off too many of these contenders. So I could maybe see him going up to lightweight and taking one fight, but definitely some time off just to let things play off, because there's killers in featherweight, and Volkanovski has his hands full, and all it takes is one loss and Max is right back in there. He's a former champion. He's had great streaks in the UFC, so I don't think it's too big of a deal for Max. I think he'll get through it, and I think we will see him fight for a title within the next 2 years.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that move up to 155 when that comes. I think when he gets his time to build himself up and move up to 55, he's going to be an exciting new addition to an already exciting weight class. Another fight with championship ramifications this past weekend saw Rose Namajunas defeat Jessica Andrade to put herself in pole position for a shot at champion Zhang Weili. The Chinese champ has looked outstanding in her recent outings, but when Rose is at her best, her boxing is as slick as you'll find at 115 pounds. And after going toe-to-toe with one big hitter in Andrade, can Thug Rose repeat the feat against Weili and claim that championship again? Give us a way too early prediction for this one, guys. Weili versus Namajunas. 2 minutes on the clock. Mike, you go first. Who you got?
Real interesting fight, real awesome fight. I mean, that's about as good as it gets ever in the history of the strawweight division. Right now, if you're asking me for a pick, I'd probably lean towards Weili. I mean, she is just a more intense version of a Jessica Andrade. Very compact, very strong, huge hitter, but she has that length, that height a little bit more than Andrade does, and I think that could give Rose some big-time problems in there. Rose, 100% capable of winning. I think she would be, obviously, one of the more elite opponents Wally has fought at this point. So I think that would be a great fight, but ultimately I think it would be end still.
Brilliant. Goes. How do you see this one? Could Thug Rose upset the apple cart and get back to the belt once again?
I think she has a really good chance. I mean, I think Rose answered a lot of questions physically and, more importantly, mentally, where she's at right now. She endured a lot on the way to this rematch, and she, under the harshest conditions, was able to put it all together. When I think of Weili Zhang, I think of her last fight with Joanna Jędrzejczyk. That was a tough fight for her. She was pushed to the end, and I can see Rose Namajunas doing a lot of the same things that Joanna did. So if I had to pick someone early, I think this complete Rose that we just saw can pull it off.
Awesome. And George, are you picking the and still or and you?
And you. Yeah, Rose is tough. She is very, very tough, and Goes nailed it. She answered a lot of questions this past weekend. Think about how comfortable she was probably going into that fight, knowing that, hey, if not for that slam, I was able to control the action. I had answers towards the first time that we engaged when she tried to slam me and I went for the double wrist lock. So she had some answers, and then going in, the fight started to unfold kind of similarly, but then Andrade comes storming back, and she showed a lot of resolve, a lot of heart, and that's what it takes to get back there. So I'm taking Rose over 5 rounds against Zhang Weili and New.
Brilliant. And of course, Rose has got that submission game as well, which a lot of people seem to sleep on. If that ends up in the scrambles on the deck, that could be very interesting to see as well. It's a fight we're all really looking forward to seeing a bit further down the line. Last topic this week, guys. Next weekend sees another UFC title on the line as Joseph Benavidez and Davidson Figueredo run it back for the gold on UFC Fight Island. Figueredo won their first fight, but he missed weight beforehand, and Benavidez has pointed to a clash of heads during that matchup as a major factor in his stoppage defeat. So they're going to run it back in Abu Dhabi on Saturday night. But who walks away with the gold? We've got 2 more minutes on the clock. Goes, who's your pick?
I think both these guys are in really stressful situations. You're right. With Figueredo missing weight that first time and now add in all the drama that's been coming around these COVID tests, it's a stressful environment. And let's just hope he does make weight for this one, because that, with a win there, that could possibly leave this division just completely decimated. Who knows? Maybe they get rid of it. I feel like Joseph Benavidez, though, has made some of the adjustments in his camp. I think he's going to come out victorious in this one. And remember, look how much time he spends on islands. It's practically a home game, right?
Awesome. George, who's your pick?
I just got that. All right, I'm going with Joseph Benavidez as well. And I'll tell you what, it's not that Davidson Figueredo did not look good. He looked great. And yeah, the clash of heads definitely impacted the fight. However, I saw what Joseph was doing, and it was going to be a game plan that unfolds over at least 4 to 5 rounds. He wasn't just going to sit there and take him out early. He was going to have to battle him on the feet, on the ground, and it was going to take a process. But we never got there. So I got Joseph. I got Joseph winning this fight. Make no mistake, both of these guys are awesome. Figueredo really, really looks like he could be the future. So I wouldn't be shocked if he won, but I got to roll with somebody. So I'm going with Joe B. One Kenobi.
Brilliant. Mike, has Benavidez got the force, like George says?
Man, so I was cage side for this first fight that happened back in February, and it is hard to get the image of Joseph Benavidez getting badly knocked out right in front of us on press row that night happening. Yes, he was having some good moments in there, but it just seemed like Figueredo had a little more zip on all his techniques going in there, and I think now he's going to be backed by even more confidence. So I'm really curious to see the adjustments both these guys make. I think it's hard to pick against Figueredo right now. He's on such a tear. Let's just hope he makes weight. Let's hope it goes smoothly there, because if he misses again, it's going to be an utter disaster. And I think Alexander Pantoja will be making 125 on the nose just in case, because I don't think the UFC is going to let a half-and-half title fight go down here if Figueredo does miss weight.
Yeah, fingers crossed we get a title fight and we get a decisive result in the main event on Saturday night. That's all we've got time for on this week's edition of Spinning Back Clique. We've got a packed week of action coming your way with 2 UFC fight nights from Fight Island in Abu Dhabi. Our man John Morgan is masked up and ready to go down there on Yas Island. And we'll have comprehensive coverage of both events on MMA Junkie this week. It means there should be plenty to unpack when we get back around the virtual coffee table for Spinning Back Clique next week. Until then, enjoy the fights, and we'll be back again in 7 days' time.